old photos of Lakefield. Alex was down taking a look at some of the photos, and we got talking about, he got talking with us about some of the history that he's aware of Lakefield, and I said, well, what if you were to share that with the Lakefield Historical Society? And he said he would be interested in doing that. So we appreciate you coming this evening, Alex, and I spent a little bit of time with him about a few weeks ago, and really, Alex has done a lot of work documenting the history of his ancestors. So I'm going to turn it over now to him to basically outline his family tree, and it's a really interesting story, and there was a lot of, they certainly contributed a lot to Lakefield over those years. So I'll let you take it over, Alex.
Thanks, Mary. Just before we start, anybody notice the mistake that was made in the write-up in the Examiner and the Lakefield paper?
My fault.
Where it reads that Alex's father, Lewis Hunter, should have read Alex's grandfather, Lewis Hunter. This down here is the only picture that I have of my great-grandfather and great-grandmother. And I will be, as we go through their family, they had a family of 8 children, 7 boys and 1 daughter. I will be dropping in cards like this, so as you'll know, and giving you a little write-up or a little talk on each one as to whether they had a family or not, or what they done. So I'm going to take you back in history to more than 150 years ago, to when the first Hunter family settled in Nelson Falls, now in the Lakefield area. My great-grandfather was born in Ireland in 1822. He came to Canada with his parents when he was 7 years old in 1829. And I don't know what his parents' first names were or how many there were in the family other than him. I don't know where they settled in Canada. I think it was somewhere along the front, as it was known in those days. Back in those days, if a young man wanted to farm, he was given a tract of land, as it was known in those days, being leased half of Lot 25 in the 5th concession of the township of Smith in the county of Peterborough, with a broken front on the river.
That was a new term I hadn't heard.
Mary had never heard of a broken front until we had the interview at the beginning of the month. The entrance to this property was off the 6th concession of Smith. In 1848, my great-grandfather came to this parcel of land. There had been another settler there on this property before my great-grandfather who did not live up to clear the amount of land in 4 years that the settlers were contracted to do in order to get the crown deed for the property. So this other fellow left. I can't go back on the family tree any further than my great-grandfather and great-grandmother. As I mentioned, they had a family of 8. Josiah Hunter, that's my great-grandfather there, was born in March of 1822. He died in February of 1911. He married Alice Coates, born in May of 1818, died March of 1908. And I think my great-grandmother must have come from the U.S., for that picture was taken in the U.S. And some number 1, George Washington, There you are. See? Born in 1850, died in 1932. I remember seeing him once. And as a young man, he went to the U.S. and no other details on him. Their son number 2, Lewis Hunter. Later in years, he became my grandfather. Born in 1852, died in October of 1934. In the 1870s, Lewis drew the brick from the old Curtis brickyard in Peterborough with horses and sleighs in the wintertime for the block of stores over on the main street, which is now occupied by the Home Hardware. He also, in the 1870s, drew supplies from Peterborough with horses and sleigh in the wintertime to the lumber camps in the Absley area, making 3 trips a week. Now we can travel it in a half an hour. Then in 1879, Lewis went over into what was then called North Douro, bought a farm, Lot 19, Concession 5 in Douro Township. Lewis Hunter married Eliza Ann Duff, born June of 1857, died February of 1934. Their children, Henry Hector Hunter, born May 1886, died May 1897. Their other son, Josiah Wellington Hunter, who was my father, born June of 1891, died in April of 1976. Welly, as he was known, married Mabel L. Nichols, born in 1895, died July of 1957, or 59. Their children, Louis Alexander, that's me, born September of 1920. Alec, as he is known, married Florence E. Sloan, born December of 1915, died in 1969, no family. Alec remarried Marjorie Ingram Nee Tivey, born December of 1937. Alec has 3 stepchildren, Nancy, Brent, and Mark Ingram. My brother, Robert Wellington Hunter, born April of 1922, died January 1993. Bob, as he was known, married Fern Freeburn Nee Bullock, born 1930. Bob had 4 stepchildren. Son number 3, Ben Rose Hunter, born June 1854, died November 1902. Ben, as he was known, was a harness maker and had a harness shop along this street where the village inn is now, someplace along on this side. Ben Rose married Mary Hendren, born in 1865, died in October of 1954. Their family, Alice Hunter, born in 1885, died December 1971. Alice married Michael Kennedy, no family and no other details. Michael Kennedy is buried in St. Peter's Cemetery in Peterborough. Charles Henry Hunter, some of you likely knew him, born August of 1896, died November 1987. And Charles operated the Lakefield Creamery for some years. and Charles, as he was known, married Hazel Kathleen Cowan, born August of 1911, died September of 2000, and they had 3 boys. Gilbert, he and his wife are retired now in Collingwood. William, he's retired outside of Victoria Harbour as a school teacher. And John, he's still a church organist in Mississauga. After these boys got their schooling here, why they left to the big city. Son number 4, William A. Hunter, born May of 1857, died August of 1936. William married Ada Johnson, born 1863, died in 1928. Their family, Roland Hunter, born October of 1889, died March of 1963, no other details. His brother, Bert Hunter, married Fanny, no children, no details. Clarence Hunter, born in 1888, died September of 1902. Their daughter, Ada Lillian Hunter, born 1902, died 1919. Now we come to the daughter. Eliza Jane Hunter, born June of 1859, died January 1947, and she was never married. And I don't know much about her. Only that if anybody in the family had any sickness or anything, why she was right there to help. Now we come to Sidney Hunter, born May 1861, died May 1953. Sid, as he was known, married Louise Lang, born in 1862, died May of 1955. They had no family. They farmed for a few years, then moved to Lakefield. Sid built 2 houses. This one first. This one here, it's up on the corner of Chippewa Avenue and Colburn Street. Mary took this one. And then he went up in 1926 and built this one up on Catherine Street. It had a great big front porch on it that reached up, just the roof of it was up here, just about even with them others. And he worked for over 20 years in Fitzgerald's hardware store, where the Royal Bank is now. And their picture is over there. The only one I have of the great uncles and aunts. Number 7, boy. Josiah Hunter Jr., born March 1863, died April 1940. Josiah married Eliza Jane Gervin, born in 1868, died in 1912. Their family, excuse me, Wilbert Hunter, born in 1885, died in April of 1918. Their daughter, Alice Hunter, I have no details on her or anything about her. Son number 7. Hector Cameron Hunter, born September of 1865, died February of 1870. This is the family of Alex's great-grandparents. Alex's great-grandparents moved to Lakefield around 1890 or 91 to this house here, which is up here on Regent Street. And now it has a wheelchair ramp. No, you haven't got that. No, you didn't get that. But it has a wheelchair ramp up here. I think you know where it is.
Is that the house, Alex, that
Yeah,
Betty
sure.
Davis lived in?
Josiah Jr. farmed until about 1918 or 19 when he sold the old Hunter homestead to William Charlton, father of Roger and the late Art Charlton. Then in 1950, William Charlton sold the farm to his son Art. Art and his wife farmed there until 1981, when they moved to Lakefield. I have no trace of the ownership of the old farm from 1981 to 1996. The Hunters had built, I better go back a little bit here. The first house that the Hunters family lived in was log. There are still some log houses throughout the countryside that one can find being lived in today. No doubt in the early days they had a log barn, and the only barn I remember was the frame barn at the foot of a steep hill. Whenever you went out from the house to the barn, you had to go down that steep hill and back up again, year in and year out. And I know of 3 log houses that are being lived in today in different places. And there is even a log building within 5 minutes walk of where we are right at the present time. Well, anybody know what it is? Fish and chips. That is a log building. The square part is a log building. I saw the logs on it around 60 years ago. And they keep covering it over with some brick or something else. There's one out on number 7 highway towards Lindsay, on the right-hand side, north side of the road. There's a big sugar bush on the left-hand side up on a flat. It's in on the right. You can hardly see it from shrubbery around it now. But I was talking to that farmer some years ago, and he says, I was told after I bought the place that this was a log house. He said, you couldn't tell it inside or out. So he said one day I took off some of the insul brick around the back where it couldn't be seen, and there were the logs. The Hunters had built a brick house on the farm, there's a picture of it over there, in the late 1850s or early 60s. This house was burnt on December the 13th, 1986. A 17-year-old girl lost her life in that fire. The original crown deed of the farm was not in the house at the time of the fire. In 2000, Charlie Hunter and Hazel, second son, asked me to go around the cemetery and write down the dates, births, and deaths of our great-uncles and great-aunts. One of the men who worked there at the cemetery told me to go up to the cemetery office that Doug or Arlene would run off a list of the people buried in the cemetery by the name of Hunter. There are a lot of them. Most of them are no relatives, and here it is. There it is. Then I checked out the ones that are relations and all, and went through it all. So I've kept that now since 2000. I've had that. I am the last one of the Hunter clan still in the Lakefield area. Come September, I will have lived in the village for 44 years. In September of 2003, on a Saturday afternoon, I decided to pay a visit to the old Hunter homestead. I had no idea who owned it at that time. I knew that a new house had been built after the fire, but I had never seen it. I knew that the barns were gone. I met the lady of the place, and she told me that they had bought the farm in 1996. She showed me a picture of the brick house, which is over there. And I also have a picture of the present house. The chimneys of the new house are built with the brick from the old house. And it's over there too. You can only see one chimney, which are on the other side. This lady showed me the original crown deed given to my great-grandfather in March of 1852. It was a little hard to read after 150 years. This lady said that she was going to get me a copy of this deed, which she did. I have it there, and I recopied this deed word for word and had it redone to make it read easier. As for me, I worked for the Lakefield Farm Supplies for a number of years. Also the Lakefield Arms, now known as Savage Arms. Assistant caretaker at the Lakefield Cemetery for 5 years. Also caretaker of Lakefield United Church for 10 years. And after I retired, I drove for the Hendron Funeral Home for a few years. And in the summer of 1988, when the bowling alley was being built, I, along with the man who was going to manage the alleys, spent many an afternoon trying to get seniors interested in forming a bowling league. I was president for the first 3 years of bowling. In November of this year, I will have put in 18 years bowling on the same league. I was also president of the Lakefield Golden Years Club for 5 years. When Mary and I were doing an interview earlier this month, and I mentioned that I was the custodian of the Lakefield Church for 10 years, Mary asked me if I had any interesting stories of my experience as a church custodian. Well, I have a couple. I will pass them on to you. Early in the spring of 1993, the then minister of Lakefield United Church said that he would be leaving at the end of June. About the middle of June, on a Friday morning, the chair of the worship committee came into the church office and said, "I have pulpit guests lined up for the months of July and August, most of September, and some for October, but I do not have one for Labor Day Sunday." You know who said that? You. Then she said, "Alex, will you do this one?" She took me by surprise, and I asked her how long I would have to make up my mind. And she said, "Give me your answer on Sunday morning." On Sunday morning, I told her that I would bring the message if she could get someone else to help out with the rest of the service. For a message on Labor Day Sunday, I spoke of some of the experiences and the things that I found myself involved in during the years being the custodian, and I'm going to pass on a couple to you now. The board of the Lakefield Church had given the Women's Institute permission to hold a 2-day convention in the fall of one of those years. and the convention was for the Women's Institute of Peterborough East. It came the morning of the first day of the convention, and I went down to the church early, for I knew the head ladies would arrive in good time. When they came in, I told them who I was and that I would drop in a couple of times during the day to make sure that the facilities were in all in working order. Then I went upstairs to the sanctuary to put on the lights and to make sure the PA system was working. One of the ladies had also came up to the sanctuary and asked me if I were leaving soon, and I said that I was. Then she said, "Stop by the desk. The ladies there want to speak to you." And I stopped at the registration desk as my way out, and the ladies there said, "We are well pleased with the setup that you have for us today. We are inviting you to come and have lunch with us today and tomorrow at 12 noon. I accepted their invitation and thanked them for it. That day, I, the only man there, sat down to lunch with 120 ladies and about 20 on the next day. That was an experience in itself. I didn't say much, for I was greatly outnumbered. And another one. I let Mary in on this one when we were doing the interview. The church board had given a minister from an outlying church permission to use the United Church for 2 wedding rehearsals and weddings that he had coming up during the summer months. As he said, his church was too small to hold the guests. It came the evening of the first rehearsal. This minister and I were talking in the upstairs hall of the church, and it came time for the rehearsal. And we went into the church sanctuary, and as we walked across the front of the sanctuary, he said to me, "Come up into the chancel with me." I followed him up into the chancel. This minister walked across the front of the chancel and leaned against the side of the pulpit. I came about halfway. The minister, still leaning against the side of the pulpit, addressed the wedding party who were seated in the front pews of the sanctuary. He said, "You, the wedding party, this is Mr. Hunter of this church. He knows all about wedding rehearsals and weddings. And at this time, I'm asking him to do the rehearsal here tonight. And we will follow along as to how they do wedding rehearsals here, and we will do the same for the wedding tomorrow." This was the first indication that I had that this minister wanted me to do the rehearsal instructions that evening. I knew all the instructions for the rehearsal and the wedding ceremony off by heart, but to be put on the spot to do this, of which I did not expect, was a surprise to me, for the minister always gave the instructions. I was a little nervous, but I got through the rehearsal and instructions. Also the wedding ceremony. The wedding went off good the next day. In about 2 weeks' time, this minister had his second wedding rehearsal and wedding, and I knew that I would have this one to do also. And that wedding went off good, too. Now, I think we're going to take a little journey down the main street and back again, or up the main street, I guess, and back again. As I remembered many, many years ago, the west side of the main street, as I remembered about 70 years ago, where the police offices now was the post office for many years. Where Carl Moore is now was a drugstore owned by a man known as Danny Burgess. where the present day clinic is now, Gordon Blake's father had a grocery store. And where the where the present doctor's office, that was the day clinic, the other one, is now was Teddy Crawford's butcher shop. And I think Len was in there too for a while. And where the home hardware stores are now, there were 4 stores. One on the corner, next T.C. Young's grocery store, Sid Hutt Billiards, Martin Holland's dry goods store, a printing shop. Then a $5 to $1 store, an Elwood Northy's drugstore, Red Wanamaker's shoe store next, Dave Miller's barber shop, that's where Joe was there. And where the shop and save store is now, there was an old building there, and Molly Thompson had a Green Lantern shop at name, and it was more of a ladies' store. Where the pantry is now, Judson Hall had a grocery store. Then on the corner, a man by the name of Northy had a barber shop. Later, T.C. Young moved his store there. Where the Royal Bank is now, Harry Fitzgerald's hardware store. Where Bose and Cox Real Estate is now was the Royal Bank. And where the flower shop is now was a shoe store and later a restaurant. And it has been used for a number of things. And next was Spence's store. I can't recall many chain places on the other side of the street. Where Millage Plumbing is now, Dave Webster had a funeral business. Further down the street, where I missed a few there, where the tea room is now, and the Warriors, George Hendon, Don Hendon's father, had a funeral home there. And the late Ralph Jackman worked for George for a while. Ralph told me this, that after a visitation one evening, he and George were listening to the radio before they went home. The power went off, so they shut off the light switches and locked up and went home. The next morning, Ralph went to the funeral home to open up. As he unlocked the door and opened it, he heard a voice say, "Good morning." They had forgotten to shut the radio off. Ralph said that he was halfway across the street before he realized the voice of Wally Crowder on the radio. Charlie Tanner had a drugstore where the jewelry shop is now, and the telephone office was next. And Leonard's Hardware was on the corner. And, as I mentioned, that the fish and chip store is long. Have we time for another one if you want to hear?
Oh, yes, please.
I'm getting near the end. This was a wedding we had at the Lakefield church. The church was almost full of wedding guests, and the wedding ceremony had started. And the minister said to the groom, "Do you take this woman to be your wedded wife?" And the groom was supposed to answer, but he didn't. He stood there, and he went over. He bent right over till his hands touched the floor. There he stood. You could have heard a pin drop. And as slowly as he had went over, which seemed quite a while, it wasn't that long, he started to come back. And he came back up, stood just as he had been before, and the minister repeated, do you take this woman to be your wedded wife? He answered her, answered him. And the rest of the ceremony went on just as if nothing had happened. And the minister and I were talking after the wedding, and he said, you know, when he was bent over that way, he says, I thought we were going to lose him. He made no indication of coming back up. If I was supple, I could bend over, but I'm not. So that is about the extent of my talk to you. I hope you have enjoyed it.
Thanks, Alex. That was great. Lots of stories there, and you could tell it was an easy interview for me to do, wasn't it? I appreciated all the preparation work that you did ahead of time. Now, we talked briefly about your time working at the Lakefield feed mill. Do you want to talk a bit about that and just tell us a bit about what it was like working there, Alex, what you did?
Well, Ken Morris had it when I started. Up until 60 or 61. Then Bob Paul took over as manager, and I was with him then the rest of the time till 1970. And when I started, I went in for a half a day, called in for a half a day. And that half day was a very long day, for it ended 15 years later. I worked for outside, and they had coal at that time. And some of you will remember Fred Webdale. He was the main one in the main part of the mill, where the feed was being made and all. And another chap was working with him. Ken, yes, I guess it was Ken Morris. He come out one day. He says, how would you like to go in and work with Fred? He says, they've had a big fight in there, them two. I said, I'll go in and see what I can do. I worked with him quite good. We got along good. And then I think it was in 1966 that Fred fell on the ice one night going home and broke his hip. So the next morning, Bob Balls comes over. He says, you're in command over here now. He says. So that was it. I worked over there then for the next 4 years. And feeds that I made, they'd take a little sample about that much in a little thing, and they could tell whether you were 25 pound out of a ton, over, or 50 pound, or what. And I averaged 90 to 95 to 98% for the 4 years that I run it. But there comes a time in your life when you've got to change, move on. So I did. I went down to the Lakefield Arms after that.
Where was it located, where it is now, or?
Pardon?
Where was the Lakefield Arms located?
Down on the River Road.
It was where it is
Just
now? Where Savage Arms is
right
now?
Right near the hydro office, hydro place down there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions for Alex? Harold?
So, Alec, were you raised on the farm out where you,
In Duro.
Was that where you were raised
I
there?
was born and raised there in Duro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
My father, it was in the Hunter name from September 1879 till May of 1967.
And that was located just south of the cheese, the Pine Grove Cheese Factory, was it, down there?
I father and brother
Your
sold
neighbor.
the farm. Mary was up there at the corner at the cheese factory. So was Brenda.
Questions?
I have one. We were friends and neighbors of a hunter family in Lakefield. Just up around the corner on Ermitanger. They be part of your family, Dick Hunter? And his wife's name was Beth.
The Hunters had the old homestead. Then they bought the one where Howard Beavis was. Then they owned the one that William Hunter. He had where Gordon Kidd used to be. He had that for a few years, and then they went west. And then he come back and ended up in Hamilton.
So, could be different.
hunters.
Must be different.
But all these other hunters that have been around, they're no relation of ours whatsoever. None at all. And there's a lot of them. They come and go.
Maureen?
Yes, did you marry and have children, or what's your family tree now?
Can't
Did
hear you
marry
in a
and
bad
have
ear.
children?
Pardon?
Did you marry and have children?
Pardon?
Did you marry and have children, she said.
No,
Your first wife, though, her name was?
no family at all.
No children.
No family at all.
Yeah. Any other questions?
And come September, I'll be 86. Yeah. So I've been around here. The hunters have been within 3 miles of an area around the village all their lives. Yep. And Charlie, he was the only one that has spent all his life in Lakefield. Yep.
Can I ask a bit about that time at Lakefield Arms? Were there very many employees?
Well, I was number 50 on the time card. When you punched the time card, I was number 50 when I went in, and I was number 50 when I came out.
And you were making rifles at the time?
Oh yeah.
The same type of sporting rifles were they, or
Well,
what kind of rifles were they?
I wasn't too enthused with it down there, but anyway. But here a couple of years ago when the Savage had open house, I went down. You could hardly find a place to park, but I went in anyway. And one of the lads that had worked there when I was there, he was a foreman now, then, and he looked at the list that you signed your name when you went in, and he seen it, and he went all around till he found me. But anyway, but I haven't been back since. They've got so much security around there now that you're not allowed in.
Well, thanks very much, Alex. That was very interesting to hear the information about the Hunter family. And you've certainly done your homework, and maybe you're a great example to all of us. We should be getting that listing from the cemeteries, and I think that's a great thing for you to have. And certainly, we appreciate you sharing it this evening. Sandy, did you, or Michael, do you want to make a presentation now to Alex?
Mr. Hunter, we thank you a great deal for this great fund of information, and I predict a very good future for you because you come from a very long-lived family. You did the arithmetic as you hope to be around for a while. As I say, we thank you very much indeed. Very good of you.
Thank you,
Do
sir.
all the preparatory work.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Did you want to make
I see you
any?
walking up and down occasionally.
Now, do take the time to take a look at some of the artifacts that Alex has here.
Yeah, there's all them pictures over there you can have a look at, and there's
And there's
a copy
even
of the crown deed, and
there's
another one
even
that I done.
a carving set that was a wedding gift to your parents.
Yeah, right.
And it's in the original box. And so I don't know whether there's anything else you want to say about those. Oh, the ash sifter. Do you want to mention that, Alex? That's an interesting, the big metal box or container here that you use now for sifting soil for your gardening. But do you want to just tell them what the ash sifter was all about, what it was used for?
Oh, you see that big ash sifter over there? That belonged to my grandfather. I think it was bought in about 1919. And I've seen him rock that in front of the furnace when they lived here in Lakefield. And how come I got it, I don't know, but it, when they were through with it, why, it came out to Dad's and sat there in the driving house for years. And then when they were going to have their sale, Dad says, if you want that, you can take it. Well, what was I going to do with it? But I sift dirt with it now for my flower beds. And it works good.
What was the purpose of it, Alex?
Well, that was bought in 1919. The price is still on it, $3.95. You couldn't even make a car out of today's.
Did they use the ash though for making soap? Was that?
Pardon?
The ash was used to make soap? Was
No,
it? What
no.
did they use the?
No. Well, they put the ashes out on the garden, and if the coke that was up on the top screen, why, you put that on top of the furnace. Of the bed of coals and to hold the heat.
Oh, I see.
It was designed to sift
That's
the
all I use
unburned
it
coal
for now.
out of the ash, right? Yeah, to feed it back into the furnace again.
Okay.
Because when you use the handle to turn the grate, you got some unburned coal down through there.
So there'd be no waste?
It's an efficiency device, let's put it that way.
So if you want to look at things over there, okay, go right ahead.
And I kept the privy suite too.
What did your dad do?
Alex went to,
He was the superintendent there.
Alex went to a lot of trouble to bring some memorabilia for us to share, and we have some other photos over on the other board to do with the village. So we have refreshments here.